You see, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had warned his companions, telling them, Man ahdatha fi amrina ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad. Whoever brings anything new in this religion, it is rejected by God. That Islam was complete, as Allah said in the Quran, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam dina. Today, Allah says in the Quran, I have completed for you your religion, and my favor upon you, and am pleased with Islam as your religion. So the religion was complete in the time of the Prophet. So, taking those two principles together, the companions, the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were very reluctant to bring anything new, to make any changes in the religion from the way that the Prophet had brought it. So, Abu Bakr was first reluctant. But Umar continued to discuss with him and reason with him to show him that what the Prophet ﷺ was doing by having the scribes record was to preserve it in writing. Not just to depend on the memory, but to also preserve it in writing. And Allah refers to the Quran in its text itself as a book. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is the book in which there is no doubt. So Allah refers to it as one text. So therefore, for us to put it in a text is not going against the way of the Prophet. The Prophet left the basic principle of recording, etc., for preservation in writing, and it was up to them to do it in the best way possible. So Abu Bakr became convinced, and he then instructed one of his companions, one of the companions of the Prophet, another one, by the name of Zayd ibn Thabit, to compile the Quran in one text. Now, when he spoke to Zayd ibn Thabit and instructed him to do this, Zayd's first reaction was the same as his, same as Abu Bakr. He said, how can I do something which the Prophet ﷺ didn't do? So, Abu Bakr and Omar had to discuss with him and reason with him to convince him to do this job. Right. He became one who took on the responsibility of compiling the Quran into one text. Now, he was chosen for four basic reasons. The first reason was that he was one of the few who memorized the whole Quran in the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he asked for the copy of the Quran from Hafsa. He called Zayd ibn Thabit to again make a transcription from this original copy to a number of other copies. And a total of 7 copies were made. And these copies were sent to the main centers of Islam at the time. One was sent to Mecca, one to Syria, one to Basra, one to Kufa, one to Yemen, one to Bahrain, and one was kept in Al-Madinah. Okay? Now, at the same time, these copies were sent along with an official reciter of the Quran, someone from amongst the companions who knew how to recite the Quran correctly. So it was not just the text sent, but a reciter was sent along with it to ensure that the recitation was correct. And an instruction was also given that all other texts, people had also made their own private copies. During this period, they had made their own private copies from their memories, or some had gone and made transcriptions from Abu Bakr, and passed on to others who made other transcriptions and so on. But it was not a controlled transcription. So there were errors. in the writing, etc. Some people made footnotes in the margin or whatever, and some people might have thought these were part of the text. So it was decided at that time that all other copies of the Quran, in this period here, all other copies of the Quran were to be destroyed. And new copies were only to be made from the official one, which came back from the time of Abu Bakr. That was transcribed systematically and with quality control to ensure that the text was pure. Actually, I'm mistaken. This process of writing, the seven copies were completed by 646, within 2 years after the time of Uthman's reign. He began 644. Within 2 years of his reign, the 7 copies were complete and sent to the centers. So, what does this mean? Allah in chapter 15, that is Surah Al-Hijr, verse 9 says, "Verily we revealed the reminder, the Quran, and verily we shall preserve it. Inna nahnu nazzalna al-dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." That Allah, this final revelation, Allah preserved it not only in the memory of people, but its text was also preserved pure. Pure from any kind of interpolation or change. This was critical. Why? Because Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, was the last of the prophets of God. Allah says in the Quran that he was the seal of the prophethood. No prophets were to come after him. So, if he were to be the last prophet, then the revelation which he brought had to be preserved for all time. Otherwise, if it were going to be distorted, as what happened to the revelations which came before, then the message would be lost. The purpose of his prophethood, being the finality, would be lost. So because God chose him to be the final prophet, then the message which he brought had to be preserved unchanged, so that people up until the day of judgment would have access to that final revelation as it was revealed. Now, this text of the Quran has been scrutinized by Western Orientalists, seeking to find mistakes, to find contradictions, so that it may also be put in the same category as the Old and the New Testament. Because we know through the science of scriptural criticism developed by Western biblical scholars, it has been proven without a doubt that the New Testament, what we know as the Gospels and the writings of Paul, as well as the Old Testament, has many interpolations have taken place. This is why you will find, for example, if you look at the King James Version of the Bible, you will see footnotes where verses have been dropped out from earlier translations. And they will say these verses were not available in the earliest manuscripts, etc.